Hello, everyone. Carter Krishnaiyer here for Beyond the Boundary. It is the 250th anniversary of the United States independence. I was intending to make this video for July 4th, but that pesky FIFA World Cup got in the way. And I had a presentation to give on the American Revolution and the American Revolution in Florida, which I've written 2 books about at the Daughters of the American Revolution, one of our local chapters. So that was kind of my USA 250 activity. Intended to make this video, but there's too much football, or soccer as we call it in this country, too much football going on of a high level to do that. I apologize for being delinquent on this, because this is a perfect July 4th story, although you could argue maybe it's a story for a year and a half from now, because that will be the 250th anniversary of that horrible frigid winter at Valley Forge for the Continental Army while the British had an occupation of Philadelphia. And what does that have to do with sport? Well, cricket was by all accounts our first national pastime, and Benjamin Franklin actually brought the cricket rule book, the 1744 laws of cricket, the first codified set of rules for the game. Now, cricket was an English game, and the rules were codified in England in 1744. The controversy over football is we know the rules were codified in Sheffield, and the first laws of the game were developed in England. However, there's a lot of evidence that points to football being a Scottish game. So this is why I've gone from 20 years ago saying England was the home of football, the birthplace of football, to saying it's where the rules were codified. I changed my tact on that by 2009 or 2010, right? That the Scots maybe really actually invented football. So cricket is an English game. And they codified the rules in 1744, and that was brought back to the United States by Benjamin Franklin. And he gave that rule book to William Shippen, who was a prominent leading citizen of Philadelphia, and actually ended up being the chief surgeon. I traded off with Benjamin Rush, who was also from Philadelphia, of the Continental Army. So the brutal winter of 1777, 1778, we set the stage. George Washington is at Valley Forge, and the portraits of this are that it was really kind of the time that tries men's souls. Although, of course, Thomas Paine had written that a year earlier about, in the American crisis, about after the loss of New York. And even though we had declared independence, this is the funny thing about 1776 being this date all these people talk about. It's really kind of odd for me as a historian of the American Revolution, because 1776 was one of the worst years for the for the Americans in the American Revolution. Yes, we declared independence. It was also a horrible year on the battlefield. We were able to liberate Boston, or take Boston, at the beginning of the year, but the rest of the year was one lost battle after another. Withdrawal from New York. We never recaptured New York during the war. And had it not been for Washington's great gambit on Christmas night and into Boxing Day, crossing the Delaware and attacking the Hessians at Trenton, the war might have been over on January 1st, 1777, and we were subjugated against the British rule. But as it turns out, we won that battle. Washington gambled and won at Princeton early January 1777. We won the Battle of Saratoga. Now, there were other losses around, and obviously had lost Philadelphia, which was the key thing. And that winter was brutal. We think about soldiers wrapped and just barely getting by, and von Steuben coming and creating some discipline and creating some sanitary conditions in the camp. But by May of 1778, the snow had melted, things were going a little better, and we were playing cricket. Continental Army was playing cricket. a game that George Washington loved, and this is of course a thing that we often hear from British historians about the American Revolution, about George Washington enjoying cricket. And of course, he had the stature, right, the athletic stature. So it's not a myth. This happened. It's preserved by the diaries of the men who were there. So Ensign George Ewing, who was a soldier from New Jersey, during the encampment, documented the match. And von Steuben, who I mentioned earlier, his intense military drills had concluded for the day. And Ewing reported that the soldiers turned to recreation, to sport, to burn off energy, specifically noting games of Wicket, which was the kind of modified American version of cricket, different rules. They were calling it Wicket. Cricket was Wicket, right? We know those are synonymous terms in many ways, was being played in the camp. So Washington himself played. So after enjoying dinner with Henry Knox, General Knox, who, of course, one of the great, actually was very important in Washington's first cabinet and one of the great generals of the American Revolution, and also captured that huge cannon from Fort Ticonderoga that served us well in Boston. He wandered out into the fields and he joined his men in a game of Wicket. So it is amazing. He was 6'2". He had the stature of Washington. He understood the psychology of his men. He needed to bond with his men at this point. So many had died of disease and freezing temperatures and starvation. There were lots of deserters that winter in Valley Forge. To keep the army from fracturing psychologically once better conditions resumed, they needed some sort of camaraderie and distraction, and it was cricket. It was Wicket cricket that did this. So Washington picks up a bat and joins the game. And he was doing it to build morale. And it was the sport the men knew. It's the sport, the one sport, organized sport they knew how to play. It was an incredible moment in American history when you think about it. So Washington actually picked up a bat. And there have been like these various images of this created years later. Even I think the thumbnail for this video is something that I found online. Probably was generated by AI for all I know. But there are these accounts of him picking up from both Ensign Ewing and from General Knox of him picking up a bat and batting. And so the difference between the way the Americans played cricket then and the British played cricket then, even though this was the ultimate English game, right? Instead of the traditional three stumps, you had two stumps because of and just sitting inches off the ground because the landscape was uneven in the U.S. We didn't have, or wasn't the United States then, the United Colonies. We didn't have these even landscapes. So because the tracks would be bumpy and it's perfectly manicured, right? These cricket pitches these cricket pitches you see particularly in the three great cricket playing nations, Australia, India, and the UK, or England and Wales. It's this, everything is flat, everything is perfect. That wasn't the way it was in colonial America. Even by that time in England, the pitches were kind of perfect and manicured and as well as they could be there. So you would have a wicket that was, stumps would be this wide, which we're used to. A little wider than the thing, but it wouldn't sit that far off the ground. And the ball was a little heavier in North America, and because the wicket was lower, the stumps were lower, you wouldn't get this sort of action. You would get this sort of action, try and keep it low to the ground, and slide or skip it. A lot of spin, like you have now. It was fast. It was what cricket is around the world, just kind of somewhat modified rules to fit the landscape, and it was the most popular game in the colonies. And so, we see Washington, not we see, but we don't have film from them, but we read about Washington realizing this was a morale builder and knowing how to play himself and knowing how to keep score himself. And so the way the game was set up, the rules were the same, the scoring was the same. It was just that the stumps were different, and the ball was a little, because it was made of what they could make it of on this side of the world. So it was a little heavier, a little bigger. I mean, a cricket ball is pretty heavy anyway. So it was an important part of morale building during the American Revolution, and an incredible semi-sesquicentennial story, America 250 story, that I don't think has really been told. And I don't know, maybe Major League Cricket did something. I mean, our Jonathan Starling was covering Major League Cricket and covered Major League Cricket on July 4th when I was, focused on football, and France played Paraguay that day, and that was quite a controversial match, to say the least. So I was focused on that, but I don't remember them necessarily discussing this. So I want to register this, and I'm sorry it's a couple weeks late, but a real great anecdote. And if you guys want to hear more about the history of cricket in the United States, I'm happy to do a few more of these videos. It's an incredible story, because it was the most popular game in both the United States and Canada until the war between the states, or the Civil War, as some of you guys prefer to call it, in the 1860s in the U.S., and then in Canada it faded out a little bit after that. And was gradually replaced. Cricket has not really regained its foothold in Canada. It's somewhat popular there, but it's gaining a foothold in the U.S. I mean, part of me does feel bad for Canada. I shouldn't feel bad for them. I kind of feel bad for them, because they've been qualifying for World Cups and trying to make a go of it in cricket longer than we have. We've just kind of rediscovered the game in this country in the last decade, and suddenly we're qualifying for World Cups and doing better than Canada is. And we're, if you look at the T20 form of the game, which is the most popular form of the game now, we're now ranked 13th in the world. Canada's ranked 20th. No, we're both in the top 20. Two highest ranked two highest ranked nations in the Americas outside of the West Indies. Obviously, the West Indies, I mean, it's not like it used to be. But we were just talking about all the great West Indian cricketers recently, and Gary Sobers just passed away. Arguably the greatest ever to play this game, and that's been their thing in the islands, right? Football came on later as a sport, and now there's a lot of basketball and even some American football down there. But cricket is the game, particularly in places like Barbados, Trinidad, and Guyana. Those are cricket-heavy areas. But outside of that, the U.S. is the best in the Americas in this sport, just like that. Which is something I'm proud of, and I'm kind of riding that wave. But I do, in a way, feel bad for our neighbors to the north who've been trying longer than us and have been qualifying for tournaments longer than us. And we couldn't qualify for tournaments because we would have to qualify against them, and they would beat us, but then they would never do anything in these tournaments. And the two World Cups we've now been in, we've done very well in. We advanced to the Final Eight in 2024, and then now in 2026. While we didn't advance to the Final Eight, we probably played better in the group stage than we did 2 years ago. So that's important, and we've got a great league in Major League Cricket that Jonathan covered. And most importantly, there's a World Cup in 28, but there's most importantly the LA Olympics in 28, where we're the host country. So we have an automatic spot in the cricket tournament, men's and women's cricket tournaments in 2028, which will be played at the new ground in Pomona, which opened during this Major League Cricket season. So a lot to look forward to. If y'all want to hear more about cricket history in the United States, I'm happy to dial in and do a little more on that. But this was supposed to be special for July 4th, and I dropped the ball because I was worried about the behavior of Paraguayan players against France and that sort of stuff, and everything related to the FIFA World Cup. So I hope everyone's doing well. I hope we can do another one of these soon.